Thank you for making the time to come and join us today. My name is Sue Jones and I'm the Executive Head of Education at the IBMS, and I'm joined today by Tahmina, who works at the University of Salford, who's a really experienced practitioner who now has an academic role, and also Aaron, who's joined us, who is a practitioner and he works at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and he's going to give us the employee perspective in what we're talking about today. So thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully you'll find it useful. You'll have time to ask some questions. And if we can get the polling to work, we're going to ask you some questions so you can give us feedback via the polls as well. So what we wanted to talk to you about today was about doing a placement in a clinical pathology laboratory, how you might go about that by giving you advice on writing your CV, looking at the job application and targeting the documents that you're writing to the particular thing that you're interested in. So it might be a placement that's organised that's for a year, it might be a shorter placement, it could be a voluntary position in a laboratory, it could be, if you were thinking of applying at the point of graduation, for a medical laboratory assistant role, which we'll tell you a little bit more about later, but that's somebody who would work in the reception area, taking the samples that arrive, and they have a specific role in the lab. It could be as an associate practitioner, which is what we call band 4 in the NHS, or as a trainee biomedical scientist, or a trainee, as a biomedical scientist if you've already done a placement. So we'll talk to you about what those different roles are in the next few slides, and we'll give you some hints and tips about what things people are looking for in CVs and in the application letter. So we've asked Aaron to join us because he's an employer, so he can give you that point of view of what things might make you stand out, what might make you look like you're somebody that they would want to pick out for interview. And then right at the end, we've got some example CVs that we've anonymised that previous students have written to show you some examples, and we can chat about those, what we like about them, what we think is good about them when we get to them. So the benefits of the placement, do you want to come back in, Tahmina? Because placements are your thing. So you can tell me next slide, please.
Okay, well, thanks, Sue. Yeah, so just a quick overview in terms of the benefits of placement. Obviously, it gives you an opportunity to get experience working in a lab, and based on my experience, the uptake of placements is highly competitive. So it's really important that if an opportunity does arise for you to complete a placement and your portfolio, you take that opportunity. And if I hadn't completed my training during a placement, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, because again, placements are really competitive. It gives you an opportunity to develop your knowledge and skills, also allows you to significantly improve the opportunities for employability. So what you learn at university, you apply that to practice, you get to develop those skills. If you're unable to secure a placement through university, try and contact local labs for work experience opportunities, or for a voluntary position to allow you to complete your portfolio. Try and connect with your local IBMS branch as well. Networking really helps. You get to meet other colleagues in the branch, and they can point you in the right direction as well. And you can apply for vacancies that are advertised for MLAs and associate practitioners. So I think they were the next few bullet points. So you might just have to press next. Yeah, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. You knew your slide off by heart. Thank you, Tahmina. So I'm just going to cover the next bit about the IBMS registration training portfolio, just to explain what it is and how it fits into the placement or the trainee positions. So the idea of the IBMS registration training portfolio is that you will compile evidence against the standards which are set by the Health and Care Professions Council, the HCPC. So they have standards of proficiency which you will evidence in a portfolio. You will have 30 pieces of evidence, and you will show how what you've done in your placement or as a trainee maps to those standards of proficiency that you need to show that you are competent in. So you'll compile lots of different documentary evidence, lots of different examples that demonstrate how you are showing that you are competent in those standards of proficiency. And one of the things that's good about the portfolio, as well as enabling you to register as a biomedical scientist, as long as you've done the right degree programme as well, it also allows you to showcase the work that you've done while you've been doing your training or while you've been on your placement. So it's a really good way to think about organising your information, about choosing the best pieces of evidence, about mapping to the standards. So there's lots of transferable skills that you're gaining, as well as professional skills. And all of that is about showing how competence is being developed in the workplace. So it's a really good thing to do. It's a good thing for interviews when you get to an interview for a post, whether it's as a biomedical scientist or if it's as something else. You can talk about what you did during that training. All of those professional skills, technical skills, competencies, and transferable skills you can talk about at an interview. So it gives you a really nice scaffold to base your answers on. And it's also good to go back to, so you can look at the training portfolio, the evidence that you compiled and how you put things together, and you can use that to give examples. If you were in an interview situation, to talk about real life examples where you've worked in a team, where you've solved a problem, where you've used a particular piece of kit, that you understand how the method works. It's really good to refer back to as well. And if you do want to get any other information on the IBMS web pages, if you follow the link on the slide, or if you put in registration training portfolio, you'll get to a page that explains more information about what the portfolio is, who's eligible to do one, and what's contained within it. And then on the next slide, why would you do one? Why do you want to complete the registration training portfolio? So to work as a biomedical scientist in the UK, you have to meet 2 criteria from the Health and Care Professions Council. So the Health and Care Professions Council are a regulatory body, and their main role is to look after patient safety. So they say biomedical scientist is a protected title, legally protected title, and only people who've done the right training are able to call themselves that and to be admitted to the register that the HCPC hold to work in that position in the UK. So again, if you want to find more information about the Health and Care Professions Council, who they are and what they do, you can look at their web pages. They look after 15 professions, including biomedical scientists, and a couple of the others they look after are occupational therapists and physiotherapists. There are 2 things that you need to have done in order to register as a biomedical scientist, and they're called Standards of Education and Training. And you would cover those by doing a degree programme which is accredited by us, the Institute of Biomedical Science. So we look at the degree programme, we look at the curriculum, and we look at what you're developing during doing that degree, and we say, yes, that meets our criteria, we can accredit the programme. And when you've done that programme, the other part that you would need to do is show that you meet the standards of proficiency. And that's where the registration portfolio comes in. So you will need to have done an accredited degree programme, IBMS accredited BSc in biomedical science. That will ensure you've got the right knowledge and understanding. And then completing the registration training portfolio in an approved training laboratory means that you will have the right SOPs, the standards of proficiency, and you will show that you've met those as well. Once you've got both of those 2 things covered, then you can apply to go onto the register as a biomedical scientist. So you can complete the registration training portfolio either as a placement year normally between the 2nd and 3rd year at university, or if you didn't do a placement year and you decide that's the career for you, you can look for a training position and you can do the portfolio after graduation. And again, there's a bit more information on how you become a biomedical scientist on our web pages. Okay, so MLA slides, I think it's back to you, Tahmina.
Thank you, Sue. So I think Aaron's going to give us a bit of an overview on the MLA and the associate practitioner roles and the kind of things that we're looking for, so their job spec in general.
Yeah, that's great, Tahmina. Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 of the like entry-level positions that you would search for if you were looking for a placement in an accredited laboratory in order to get access to doing your trainee portfolio. So the first role is entering at Band 2, and that's called a medical laboratory assistant. This role involves receiving patient samples and requests forms according to departmental procedure, including entry of patient requests into Laboratory Information Management System, which is our LIMS systems that we all use. You will be expected to monitor and maintain basic laboratory equipment, for example, centrifuges, fridges, and freezers. We'd expect you to perform basic laboratory techniques and often for like specified analyzer maintenance and reagent preparation. So from lab to lab, that's always going to differ. And as you progress through labs, you'll see that there's a wide range of analyzers and equipment that are used in various different disciplines. You'll be expected to respond to telephone and face-to-face inquiries in a polite and efficient manner, undertake filing and scanning of patient records as required, ensure all the laboratory documentation is completed in a timely and efficient manner, contribute to the work of the laboratory as an effective team member, following all of the relevant policies and procedures, and monitor, promote, and adhere to the trust and departmental health and safety requirements, including the correct disposal of waste and control of infectious hazardous waste. So The next slide, please, is the associate practitioner. And this often starts at around a band 4. So what we've done is separated each of these into different kinds of skills and things that we'd expect. So for communications and relationships, we'd expect you to assist and liaise with staff, patients and visitors, answer telephones and deal with incoming inquiries about both specimen reception and laboratory areas, report adverse incidents to your superiors, so a registered BMS for seniors and band 6s, attend team briefing and departmental meetings. For analytical and judgmental skills, you'd need to be able to manipulate and handle specimens, including the preparation of sample analysis, make decisions within the own area of work for example, mislabeled samples and problems with sample integrity. Propose changes to the SOPs, and also planning and organizational skills, which will be to prioritize urgent work, sort, file and distribute laboratory reports. Physical skills, we'd expect good hand-eye coordination for handling delicate tools, for example, microscope slides, small specimen types, and a high degree of speed and accuracy when performing laboratory testing. Responsibility for patient care, as with all registered professionals, this is equally as important as when you're starting out. So you need to be able to prepare and process patient samples for diagnostic testing, perform analytical procedures according to the SOP, and prepare accurate and consistent preparation of samples, reagents, chemicals, the equipment and the QC material to ensure the accuracy of these patient results. So although both of these roles come in at a non-registered level, they are vital to the laboratory to get right and for us to get all of our processes. And at the end of the day, you begin to build that picture of what is important and what you're looking for once you're an actual registered biomedical scientist. So you'll start to learn at the end of each patient specimen, there is a patient. So I'll go on to discuss the next thing, which was what we'd be looking for in a cover letter. So we'd look for examples of communication, team working, basic laboratory skills, promptness and timekeeping, professionalism / career history, and essentially a keen interest in a discipline. So often when we get a cover letter at an entry level, we're looking at where to place you. So if it was coming from an NHS jobs perspective and you're coming in as either an MLA or an associate practitioner, you'll be actually applying to that specific discipline. So it's important that you tailor your cover letter to the discipline. Whereas if you're entering as a student and you're looking at student placement, we often have placements in various different disciplines. So we'll try and target your experience and your interests as to where we place you in the laboratory. You also need to show that you know, have a brief understanding how a laboratory works and why they think that this is the route for them, and also detail any key achievements. So just be brief, concise, punchy and to the point. Remember, the cover letter is the point an employer will decide how they are going to view the rest of your CV. It's essentially a selling point to make them want to read more about you. At a junior point in your career, you may not necessarily have examples of everything, but it's important to demonstrate that you can understand the importance and what is expected by an employer when you are starting your career. So now we'll go on to discussing what we're looking for in the CV. So the employer generally has a checklist of essential and desirable skills you must match in order to progress to an interview stage. This is where you can expand on examples in your covering letter, but demonstrate where you've learnt key skills that they're looking for and in which scenario you've used them. The top tips are to keep it chronological and concise, and almost think of the job description as a mark scheme. Structure is important, so start with your essentials, identifying who you are, the contact details, then detail your education, your career history. This should tick most of your essential criteria. Your supporting statement is where you can really sell yourself with the desirable criteria. Examples may not just be pertinent to a healthcare setting or laboratory, although they're desirable. We know that at the start of your career, It's not always possible, so always use relevant examples of work in this scenario. Don't just miss out things because you think, oh, I've never done that. Think long and hard about it. You may have done it in another work scenario. Remember, experience can be compensated by showing willingness, professionalism, and a desire to learn. Ask for lab tours to show a willingness to understand more. For example, if you've never worked in that setting or that specific discipline, ask for a lab tour, try and find out a little bit more about it. Do your research. Employers are offering you a real-life opportunity, and remember, the BMS world is small, so first impressions count and stay with you for the duration of your career. So start as you wish to continue, and the best of luck. I'll now pass back over to Sue, who will go through some examples of cover letters.
Thank you, Aaron. So some really good advice there from an employer's point of view about what kind of things they're looking for. So what we're going to do in the next couple of slides is just show you some example cover letters. So we're not expecting you to remember everything about them. It's the general feel of them, and bearing in mind what Aaron's just said about what employers like to see. So remember, when you're writing a cover letter, it needs to be quite formal. We don't want text speak, we don't want abbreviations, we want to have it in quite formal English, and you need to be as clear as you can about who you are, why you're interested in that post. And it's really interesting what Aaron has said about showing that you're interested in a particular area, but also showing that you can be flexible. So it may be there's one particular thing that you would really love to do, but it's not possible. So you need to think about, if it wasn't that one thing, would I be happy to take a different discipline, or would it be if it was slightly different or a different hospital, not the one I was thinking of? Make sure that you say that in the cover letter. So this is the first point of contact between you and the person who's looking at the CVs and cover letters. So you want this cover letter, as Aaron's just said, to give a really good account of yourself and to make it sound like you're someone they want to look at more. So be clear about who you are, what career stage you're at. So you can see this is from a second year student on a biomedical science programme. It's important to say the programme you're studying is accredited by the IBMS, because it needs to be for you to be able to get a placement to do the registration training portfolio. Tell them where you are, but if where you study is away from home and you're looking for a placement nearer home, then say that you live around the corner from wherever it is you're applying to. So make it clear that you're local, or that you're studying locally, and that you're interested in that particular trust, and why it is that you want to take a placement, or why it is you're looking to apply for that role. And then you want to talk about your skills and attributes, and what is it about you that makes you a good fit. So as Aaron said, each of the jobs that's advertised will have a job descriptor with it. If you know the person's name, if it says please address letters to person X, address the letter to person X. It shows you take the time to look at that information and you've actually listened to the instruction. So if you have a name, put dear, name of whoever, this is me, this is what I'm currently doing, and this is why I'm applying for the job. So why are you interested in this particular role? What is it in the job descriptor that's really made you think that's the right thing for me? And what are you bringing with you that makes you a good fit for them to take on in the team? If this is the first thing that you're applying for, whether it's a graduate position or whether it's a placement, if it's the first scientific role you're applying for, you won't have lots of scientific examples from work, but what you will have are lots of things you can talk about that you've done in your degree. So think about the practical classes you've done, the subjects that you've studied, the modules that you've done. Are you particularly good at one thing? Are you good at oral presentations? Are you good at organising your time? Are you good at presenting data in lab reports? Which of those subjects has really ignited something in you where you think that's really interesting, I want to do more of that? And tell them a little bit about that in the letter. So if you see this letter is about half a page, 2/3 of a page, that's fine for a cover letter. You don't want to go on for reams and reams of paper because they don't have time to read them. So being clear and concise about what you've learned, what transferable skills you have, what technical skills you have, and what knowledge and understanding you've got in a clear letter is a really good starting point for the cover letter. So if you've managed to do a visit to an NHS lab, you could talk about that. Some universities do try and organise those for students. So if you can say, I've been in the pathology lab, I liked it, this is what I liked about it, I went to my local trust with the university to do that, or I haven't been in one, but these are the practical classes I've done at university, and this is why I'm thinking I want to apply for a placement. All of those things would be good to say. Make sure that you say that you've attached your CV, make sure you give your contact details, and make it easy for them to come back to you if they want to. And here's a second example, very similar format. First paragraph says who they are, that they're studying an accredited degree again, where they're studying and why they want that placement opportunity, or you could substitute that with why I want this particular role. If you can quote back to the person that you're writing to, the name of the role exactly and the trust, it shows you're taking the time to look at that job descriptor and you're targeting your letter to that trust. You could have a cover letter that's got the basic information in if you're applying for several things, and you can adapt it to each one of those things that you're applying to. So you could have good standard information that explains who you are, what you've been studying, which modules you were good at, what skills you've developed while you've been there, and if you've managed to have a look at a clinical laboratory before. You could talk about your interests, but remember to say that you are flexible. If it needed to be something that's not what you've mentioned in the letter, that you would be happy to do anything else if that's what's available. And again, make sure that you've talked about why you want the job, what it is that it means that you were interested in that role, and where you think it might take you to. They're quite nice things to add in at the end of the letter. And again, where it's highlighted, address it to the person that's listed, make it really clear what your contact details are so they can't miss them, and say that you're looking forward to hearing from them. Try and get some enthusiasm and some interest over in the language that you use in the letter. And that, again, makes it sound like you're really interested in that opportunity and you're waiting to hear back from them as well. So now we've got some examples of CVs. I know they're quite small on the slide. So Tahmina, do I just need to double click on each example?
Yeah, you can try that, Sue. If you can't, then I can share my screen and
I will come out of that and I will stop sharing my screen and then
yeah, I'll share mine then. Yeah.
Lovely. So I should have stopped sharing now.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can see it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this is an example of one CV, and I've made comments where I think it's important to go back and have a look at. So I have received CVs before where students might have written, you know, I'm an aspiring student studying biomedical science, wanting to become a clinical scientist, but not quite sure, understanding what the difference is between a biomedical scientist and a clinical scientist. So I've had to go back to them and say, are you aware that these are two different types of jobs, and that you're applying for a placement that allows you to become a biomedical scientist? So similar here as well, just making sure you're you demonstrate your understanding of the different areas. So they've written biomedical science research or similar, which is fine, obviously, if you want to go into research and you want to do this placement. But if it's research that you're after, you might be more aligned to apply for a research placement rather than an IBMS one that allows you to become a biomedical scientist. So I've written here, you know, there might be some elements of research involved in the role of a biomedical scientist, but in the pathology labs, when you are a biomedical scientist, you're working more in a sort of clinical context rather than research. So that's something that you might want to think about. Other things as well that they've done here where you've got key skills and achievements listed, and they've written sort of research, developed good research skills and knowledge while completing the dissertation and research assignments at college and university. It's quite easy to list something like this on a CV but not expand. So to me, this is insufficient information because you could kind of pull these out from a syllabus or learning outcomes. So we need specific examples. So expand on what good research skills have you developed. And then again, similar to communication. So you've a student here has written they've got effective communication, that display during societies and lab sessions, can communicate well with both students and tutors. Again, communicate well, how? Provide examples. What kind of communication skills have you got? Is it verbal, non-verbal communication skills that you're good at? Those kind of things are really important. Team worker, mentioned they're a good team worker, dependable, organised, flexible, adaptable. But the way that they've written it here is a good team worker is dependable. You want to apply it to yourself, not provide a definition of what a good team worker is. So yeah, be specific about yourself and not generalize it. It's your CV, so we want to know about you. Again here, able to meet deadlines, kept to deadlines within studies, kept on target within the workplace. How we want to know how you've done that. Again, you want to stand out. So when we're looking at this CV, we'll be sort of using a scoring system, looking at the words that are coming up often, but whether you've provided examples or not, and then we'll shortlist the candidates who have got the highest scores. So if you're just being generic and not writing in specific examples and specific skills that you've gained, and someone else stands out with a CV that has actually provided examples, they're the ones that are most likely to be shortlisted. So again, these are things that you need to be thinking about when you write up your CV, being specific and providing examples. Here, so a volunteer with KidsScan, which is a charity for children with cancer. So they've written here how they volunteer to sell tickets at a charity event to raise money for children with cancer. But I can't really see here what you've gained from it. So again, if you're going to write about a voluntary role, I think it's really important that you need to include in there what skills you've gained, what experience you've gained, you know, how have you developed your knowledge by being in that voluntary role. Again, things to think about. So that's CV1. I'm going to share CV2, Sue, which is one of the ones that you had provided. We will answer questions at the end as well. So we've got Jim online at the moment who's looking at the questions and answers, but we will read out some
too, Tahmina, as we've been going through. So I was just typing some answers while you were talking, but we can pick those up at the end and we can do some further ones as well, can't we? Yeah,
thanks, Sue.
So again, if we look at this example of a CV, similar things to what Tahmina's just been talking about. It's about categorizing the things that you've done that are going to be useful for the employer to know. And sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive. Oh, it's just gone off the screen, Tahmina.
Oh, has it gone? Oh, sorry, I'll bring it up again.
No problem.
Try again.
Sometimes it's just if you click off the window, it goes, doesn't it?
Can you see that now?
Yeah, it's come back on, thank you. So what you can see the person has done here, so obviously they would put their name and contact details at the top, is to talk about things chronologically, but in reverse order. So sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive. You would start with what you did at school, then your A-levels, then your university. But actually, from an employer's point of view, what they're interested in is what you've done most recently. So what have you studied in your accredited degree, which is useful for the placement or for your graduate employment? So these will be the modules that map most closely to what you would be doing in the workplace. So you can see that this person's organised it for the most recent thing they did backwards. And then if we go down a bit further, they were a student who had a chance to do a placement. So this was a graduate thing that they were applying for, I think. Or was it? No, that was a short summer placement, I think, that they did. So they put any any relevant employment history that they've had in there as well. It may be that you don't have lots to talk about, but don't forget things like if you've worked in a shop, if you have worked at a local cinema, if you have done any volunteering roles. Any of those things, part-time jobs, are really good for talking about transferable skills and team working and building confidence and organising your time. So don't forget to put them in. Even if you think, well, it's not lab-based, they might not want to know. Think about what you learned from doing it and include that in the examples that you give. And then you can see under key skills, what they've picked out will be a combination of things that they've done through the modules they've studied and through the assessments they've done. So this is a really useful tip. When you think about the modules that you've done, think about what you were asked to do for your assessment and think about the skills you develop. So you will have done oral presentations, you will have done written things, you will have done lab reports, you will have had to read scientific papers and make them into clear, concise bits of written work. So think about all the things that you've been asked to do at university and convert that into skills that you have. And you can see on this CV, they've actually linked them under subheadings. So if you think about what could I give as examples of written communication? What could I give as examples of problem solving? What could I give as an example of working well analytically? Where can I talk about organising my time or meeting deadlines, all of those kind of things? And then what IT skills do I have? It makes it really easy for the person who's looking at it to negotiate what you've done. And then the last little bit would just be a little bit about you. So again, this is about you standing out. Have you done anything that shows that you are really interactive with other people on the course? Have you been part of a student society? Did you hold a particular role? Are you interested in a particular sport that you do things with other people and you're really good at team skills? So just think about things that you enjoy doing and think about how an employer might view that. What might make you a good employee because you've done that activity? So rather than just say, I've been in the archery club and I like to read books and I went on a trip once. Think about what that's bringing to your CV. Think about what it is that is telling the person that might want to employ you about you as a person. Should we have a look at the next one, Tahmina? And then I think, should we open up for questions? I've just got an eye on the time. That will give us...
Yeah. Do you want to mention just about the referees?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. So for referees, if it says on the job description how many referees that the person is asking for, make sure you do that number. Most jobs will be 1 or 2. Quite often in my experience for placements, they will ask for someone at the university where you're studying to send a reference and somebody where you've been in a place of employment. If you haven't had a part-time job and you're applying for a placement, you could ask 2 people at the university. So commonly, someone who's your personal tutor, so you should have a personal tutor, they should know you well, they would be a good person to ask. If it's towards the end of your degree and you're looking at a graduate position, your research project supervisor is a good person to ask because they've seen you in the lab. They can talk about the skills that you've developed and about you being autonomous and independent and all of those good things that we would want to see as you develop through the degree. So think about somebody at the university that could give you a reference, and also think about in an employment setting or someone who's outside the university, if that's appropriate to put them in as a referee as well.
Thank you, Sue.
So should we look at one more?
Yeah, just gonna... See that?
Yeah, that's just appeared. Thank you very much. So again, you can see name, address, contact details at the top of the CV, make that really easy to see. Talk about where you are, talk about, again, modules. So this would be a student who is looking to do a placement. So they've got first and second year modules. They're looking to go on a placement at the end of year 2. So that's what they've got on their CV. If you've got module marks that you're particularly proud of or assessments that you're particularly proud of, flag them up for the person who's reading the CV. So if you're really, really good at written work, if you're really good at oral presentations, if you've got a fantastic first year average and you haven't finished the second year yet, put it on the CV and say, look, across all of those different subject areas, I did really well and my first year average was this. That's a nice thing because they won't know that unless you tell them. So again, they've written in chronological order what they're doing at university and then A-levels and then what they did at school. Don't feel you need to list all your individual GCSEs. Just say how many you did, the grades that you got and the ones that are relevant. So if you think about when you applied to your university course, they would have asked you about your science GCSE, your maths and your English. So put those in if they are good grades and you want to show them. If you want to just say you got between grades A and C, or the numbers as they are now between 9 and 5 or 9 and 4 for those subject areas, just pop that in. If you think about what they want to see in your CV, it's about your laboratory skills and your transferable skills, not just a page of your qualifications. So try and keep that bit short if you can. The way that this person has talked about their laboratory skills and techniques is to list them. So it's quite easy to see them. They've talked about the things they've done, and that could be something they could pick up at interview. So another top tip is don't put something on your CV and say you've done it and you understand it if you can't talk about it. So whatever you're putting on your CV, they could ask you about when you go to have an interview. So if you say, I'm really good at doing this particular technique, make sure you've looked over it, make sure you've refreshed your memory and you understand you can talk about it in an informed way. So they've got lots of different things from practical skills to plotting data, analysing things. So that's quite a nice broad range of skills that they're showing there. And then one of the things they used to do at the university at York St John is to give badges to people. So this went down well when they went for interview. They would do particular practical competencies in the lab and be awarded a badge. So they could talk about the badges that they had. So again, that's some of them are around skills like pipetting, using a pH meter, using a spectrophotometer, but also about some academic ability to be able to do the quiz, and also about coming in to help other people. So being a laboratory mentor for other students. So that's a nice thing to be able to talk about as well. And then under key skills, remember to talk about your personal skills. So the bit above is all about technical skills. This is what I can do in the lab. These are competencies that I already have. Don't forget to talk about those transferable skills: communication, being organised, being hardworking, being able to manage different deadlines. That's a really good thing to be able to say. Managing your own workload. Do you work well in the laboratory? What do you know about health and safety? Have you done some training when you've been in your laboratory at the university? I'd be very surprised if they didn't talk to you about health and safety, things you need to do to be safe in a laboratory environment. So you could talk about those a little bit. And then again, finish with hobbies and interests. What do you enjoy? What do you like doing? And relate it back to the job that you're interested in or to the particular subject area that you're talking about. Okay, is that all right, Tahmina?
Yes, thank you, Sue.
Lovely. So I can see in the Q&As we've got a few questions that have been coming in. People have been answering as we go. So should we ask if anybody would like to put their hand up to ask anything? I can put the attendees on. I can see that somebody's got their hand up at the moment. I'll ask you to unmute if you want to ask your question. So if anybody else would like to ask a question, if you pop your hand up, it will signal to us that you have got a question to ask. So I'm just going to ask to unmute. So it's ELJ743. Nothing's happening.
Oh. It might be that they're not able to unmute themselves. So while they're looking at their settings, should we move on to the Q&A in the chat?
Yeah. Could I ask the person who does have their hand up, I'm going to put your hand down. Could you put your question in the chat? And we'll do it that way. If we're not able to unmute you in real time, I'm clicking on ask to unmute, but if it's not asking you to unmute, I'll lower your hand, and then if you can just pop it in the questions and answer box, we can do it that way. Okay.
Thank
so
you.
Do you want to go back up the list then, Tahmina? Questions? Yeah,
so I've got a question here. Are the placements normally paid, and what effect does it have on our bands as graduates? So most placements aren't paid. You can always ask the question. Some trusts might offer a bursary, so it is always worth asking. Usually, if you do complete a placement year, you don't pay tuition fees for that year at university.
And you can access your student loan as well. So it's a question people ask a lot, and it is something that I'm discussing with David, who's the CEO of the IBMS, about could we support placements, because I don't think it's fair if somebody wants to do a placement but they can't afford to do one. So what students will normally do is tell Student Finance England that they want to do a placement, they will tell them what kind of placement it is and that there's no bursary, and they will access their student loan as normal. So it tends to be for the students that I have done placement the same or slightly more than your normal allowance, but it does mean you have to answer your student loan.
Thank you, Sue. Another question, I don't know whether Aaron or yourself might want to answer. Got a question from Heba. Do we have to mention names in the reference section?
I would say, I'll go first, Aaron. I would say personally yes, because if you just say references can be provided, that looks like you haven't thought about it or you haven't asked permission. So I would say, if you know you're applying for things, approach your personal tutor and the person at the workplace, whatever it is you want to put down, and put them down as a named person, because it looks more of a complete CV rather than you've just dashed it off and not thought about who you want to ask. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Sue. It just makes our job as an employer so much easier if we know who we need to contact and quickly. So we need all of the names and the details in the reference section, please.
Thank you, Aaron. We've got a question here that was asked in the chat, and then I think it might have been answered privately. So I'm just going to read it out because it might benefit all students. But the question was, can you complete the IBMS registration training portfolio at a private lab, or does it have to be NHS? So the answer that Jim had given, kindly thanks, Jim, you need to complete your portfolio in a lab that holds IBMS training approval. It is usually an NHS lab, but then Aaron's answered that there are a few private labs that have IBMS training approval. So always ask the question whether they've got the IBMS training approval.
I think that's really good advice to me, because that's something that falls under my role. So there are private companies that do clinical pathology, and they do have training approval. So it is worth asking the question. If it's a general industry placement, if it was a pharmaceutical company like AstraZeneca or GSK or something like that, they probably don't. But if it is a healthcare type laboratory, it is worth asking the question, and you can check with us because we have a list of people that have the training approval.
Thank you, Sue. And another question was, oh, I lost it now. A student has completed a placement year. Is it true that you need post-registration experience to get a biomedical scientist post? And this student has completed the IBMS registration training portfolio. So I've said to them, as long as they've completed the portfolio and they've successfully completed an IBMS accredited degree, they're eligible to apply for HCPC registration, and they're eligible to apply for Band 5 biomedical scientist positions.
Yeah, that's right. So it's people forget sometimes, I think, that the registration training portfolio is meeting the threshold to enter the profession. So if you have completed it, you will have experience up to the point of registration. You won't have post-registration experience necessarily, because that's not what the portfolio is. So yeah, wherever you're applying to, if they know that you've already got the training done, that's usually quite a good incentive, I would say, because they know that your training is going to be completed, and they know that you're going to have further training to undertake, but you've done what you need to do to become registered. So what do you think, Aaron, from an employer's point of view of that experience?
Sorry, it was really cracking up. I didn't catch half of it.
Oh, sorry, my microphone goes funny every once in a while. So the question was around experience after the portfolio. So just on the registration training portfolio, how much experience will people want them to have? And I said, well, it's an entry point, isn't it? You've met the threshold to get the registration portfolio, but there's still training to do.
Yeah, so ideally, as I tried to stress earlier in the slides, we are looking for experience, and the fact that they've ticked their registration portfolio is a great thing, because that is one of the person requirements. Where I was going for like the different types of skills and things that you have to exhibit, they're not always necessarily just from a laboratory perspective. And we know that somebody that's coming in at like an entry level, whether they're an MLA, associate practitioner, or a trainee, they may not have had all of that experience, but you may have used it elsewhere. For example, I think I responded to one of the other questions where they said I haven't had the experience, or I haven't got all of the skills, but there may be other scenarios which you've used those skills in. For example, team working, a telephone manner. If you can justify where you've used that, that gives us a reason to then shortlist you for an interview, because we've got an example of where you have. Whereas if you just don't meet the requirement at all, or say, oh, I haven't done that in a lab setting, for example, then we can't further run your application. So I just stress that point. Not all skills are going to be just pertinent to the laboratory. You may have used them elsewhere, and we know that when you're starting your career. So please don't let that put you off, but just make sure you do, where applicable, that you do target and make sure that you're covering all of the skills.
Thank you, Aaron. I do have some more questions in the Q&A. Sorry, Sue, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say to me, I do need to go because I'm doing yeah, I'm going to have to go. I just want to say thank you to everybody. We will go through the questions, and we can share the recording afterwards, because a lot of people have asked them. And Jill has done a survey, feedback survey. So Jill, if you jump in right at the end after I've had to go to just explain, we can send that out and people can give us feedback about the session today.
Thank you, Sue.
No problem. Thank you for joining, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye, Sue. So we do have quite a few questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from like the ones that have come in first, but only the ones that apply to CV writing at the moment. If there's any other generic questions, I'll keep a record of the chat and I'll provide those answers afterwards. But for the purpose of this workshop, it's CV writing, so I'll jump on those questions. So Aaron, I think this one might be a good one for you. A student has asked, they've said they've got a couple of years experience in a microbiology lab, and they're currently a student. What should they mention first in their CV, their education or their experience?
So as I said earlier, keep it chronological. So I need all of the details of yourself as a person first. Secondly, your education, because I want to check that you've got everything there, and what you're qualified in and where you're at in terms of your education. And then I'd like your experience. So keep it in that order. Often when you look at a good CV template, as some of the ones that we've seen, they keep them in that order, where you've got all of your data first, your name and all of your contact details and stuff, then your education, and then all of your supporting evidence and your career history. So in that order, please.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, there's some around STP, which I think will be better answered in a separate session around STPs. A question about the CV. Do we put information on separate lines instead of in paragraphs to make it easier to read, or are paragraphs okay? So I can answer this one. As long as you've made it easy to follow, it should be fine. I'm not quite sure what you mean about putting information on separate lines instead of in paragraphs. Do you mean bullet points? One of the examples that Sue talked about earlier, there was a list of lab skills that were listed as a bullet point. So that's quite easy, you know, just to quickly skim through. You've got to remember that when employers have received CVs, we'll receive hundreds and hundreds of them. So the easier you can make it and the quicker the process is, the easier it is to kind of shortlist candidates. So if you've got lab skills that you want to put in bullet points, that's absolutely fine. But I was looking at one the other day and a student had a CV that was quite long. And I said to them, instead of having a massive bullet point of all the lab skills, maybe put a paragraph into and identify the skills that you really want to focus on. And that will get rid of you using a huge chunk of the paper, just using bullet points. So I'm conscious we've only got a minute left. A question about the recording being available. Yes, it will be available on the IBMS website, so just keep an eye out for that. I do have a comment from Jim, so I'm just going to read that out quickly. Jim's been writing an evaluative feedback questionnaire during this session, and that will be circulated to everyone who's joined us today. Please, could you take a couple of minutes out just to answer the questions in the questionnaire, just so we can get some feedback on what we can do certainly next time. Thank you. Thank you to Aaron as well for stepping in today, and thanks to all the students who have joined us. Do keep an eye out for the next session. So we've timed these because placements being advertised at the moment, so we thought a good time to do the CV workshop was now, so students can write up the CVs and submit them, and the next one we'll be doing will be on sort of interview preparation. So do keep an eye out on the series of sessions because they'll be useful for you, especially if you're applying for a graduate job after you've completed your degree, or whether you're applying for a placement. Is there anything else from you, Aaron, that you want to mention?
No, that's brilliant. Just thank you all for your time. I hope it was really helpful. If there are any other questions, you can always reach out, and we'll always do our best to try and answer any questions. So yeah, great. And I hope it was really helpful for you all.
Thank you, everyone.